What's up, guys? Andrew from IGN here. We are looking at the beginning of BioShock Infinite. I'm here with creative director Ken Levine.
Hello, Andrew.
And Ken, can you kind of just walk us through, this is how we are first introduced to the world of BioShock Infinite. What were you guys trying to achieve here?
Yeah, this is the very beginning, obviously, and we always like to tend to start our games with something that's pretty familiar, but also different in some ways. Whether in BioShock 1 it was a plane crash and sort of a Robinson Crusoe setup, and here is a kind of a film noirish style mission. You're given this mission to find this girl, and this whole sequence is about setting up what's going on, but it's really about setting up the character Booker and who he is and what his goals are. And we could have made our lives a little easier by having these two characters be a little less elusive about their language, but you'll find out what that's about later on. But this is actually a version. This is not the final shipping version. The version you actually have, there's a couple more pieces of data. Elizabeth's name is on the photograph. So because we had some people realizing they didn't know who that was. So you see things that change slightly before the game gets quite finished, because this is the version we showed you back in December. And we still had a few weeks of development left on it.
I mean, what's so interesting to me about the content in that box is that it is like 4 simple items that tell you so much immediately, and I think you guys picked very well what you were communicating and how you were communicating it. What was kind of the line of thinking behind each of those items, behind the photo, behind the key?
They went back and forth over and over again, and what he held versus what was held in the back of the box are different. Sometimes, originally there were 2 of the same item, and we're like, well, why would you want 2 of the same item? Because it tells the story twice and it distracts. Every single thing had to be meaningful there. There's no accidents in that box in terms of what we're trying to tell, because we don't have Booker just being able to tell his own story through a narrative, through a narration or a voiceover. We didn't want to do that. So we really wanted the world to tell his story for him. And that box, the mission he's on, says a lot about him. And then we actually added some things fairly late in the game, probably shortly before we took this build to LA when we first showed it to you guys, that even further clarified it. And we ended up figuring this stuff out. By what's not resonating, sometimes by giving it to people like friends and family and having them play it and seeing their reaction. We thought, oh yeah, Booker's really, really, really clear, and it turns out he wasn't. So we kept coming up with new ideas, and as you get later in the game, your hands get more and more tied, in the development process. So you have to be very, very clever with getting ideas across.
And so here we're coming up to this lighthouse, which is kind of a nice nod to the original BioShock, I think. And seeing this note that appears to be from Booker's employers.
Yes, and clearly these people mean business. And this is another one of those late additions in terms of setting up Booker's states. We added this note fairly late, because we wanted to be clear that the people Booker was working for meant business. And and everything we do is designed to sort of, and I'm without spoiling too much of the craft here. And if you really want to work completely, just to view the sort of experience of the game and not sort of hear about the craft behind it, I'll probably get into some things here that you don't want to hear. I'm not to discourage you guys not to watch all IGN's great content, but for instance, this room used to be very, very crowded with stuff, and we kept taking stuff out because the focus was entirely on this, and we didn't want the eye to get distracted.
And I think it's so cool here that you see Booker. This is kind of letting you see that Booker is a real character. More so than I think some of your previous protagonists that were just kind of a conduit for the player.
Yep. And the player can skip that if they want. That's an optional little moment. But it was a nice little character-defining moment. And
I mean, what was the thought behind these posters that kind of established, even the From Sodom I Lead Thee, establishing kind of the ground below as sort of this place that people in Colombia see as lesser than what they are?
Yeah, well, these were the notion of having samplers were Jordan Thomas's idea, actually, which I thought was really cool, because we're trying to figure out a way to express, to start hinting at some of the religious themes, and samplers also were just it also really sets the time period. Because you don't see those a lot anymore, but they were very common back then. And so it was a way to start hinting at the religious themes and also reestablish the time period, because you'd be amazed how many people miss the text 1912 at the beginning. You got a lot of people who were confused by that.
I like this Columbia flight path here too. I mean, was this kind of teasing where Columbia used to go? Is that sort of the idea here?
No, it's whatever people think it is. That's one of the fun things. You sort of put it up there, and hearing people's hearing people's views on what things mean and what they are is always interesting to do. And I'm sure that, you know, there is a authorial intent here, but that's, you know, we'd rather sort of have people figure that out for themselves.
I think it's interesting here too that you kind of, you know, I think people are pretty attuned to the idea of picking up items in a first-person shooter, but here even, you know, you're getting your first Silver Eagles, you're kind of slowly like being able to pick up resources that you can continue to use.
Yep. And of course you have all the classic, you know, Duke Nukem stuff. And here, you know, as you go along, you start to see that things are maybe a little more chaotic than you might have thought. You go over that junk.
Signs of a struggle,
yeah.
Possibly.
Little subtle details along the way.
I mean, how much went into kind of making sure that, you know, this wasn't just an empty lighthouse that you're walking up? How much attention went into kind of the writing on the wall and, you know, it's not even necessarily legible, but it is there as a nice detail?
That was all actually very, very, very late because we didn't really realize how important it was to sell Booker's story in the lighthouse rather than the story of just going to Columbia. And so this lighthouse keeper, the writing on the wall, the mess, all that got added in the last few weeks before I came out to show it to you guys. Because we realized that story wasn't resonating very well. And, you know, little details like, you know, the fact that he's got a pillowcase over his head. Like, you know, random killers don't put pillowcases over people's head and shoot them. I mean, this is, you know, clearly some kind of professional work. And so, like, all these details just kept getting added along the way and mostly from having people play it and seeing, you know, were they getting our intent? Were they getting what we were trying to do?
I mean, up here, as you kind of approach the end of this beginning part, I like these three symbols, right? You've got the scroll, the key, and the sword. Are these indicative of the three founding fathers? Is that kind of the idea here?
Yeah, you'll find as you go through the game that these are important symbols to the people of Columbia. They were gifts from the Angel of Columbia to the founding fathers. The scroll representing law went to Thomas Jefferson. The key representing science and industry went to Ben Franklin, and the sword representing military power went to George Washington.
Well, of course, if you were to ring those bells, we would begin our ascent to Columbia, but I think we'll save that for the players as the day comes close. BioShock Infinite, finally hitting stores March 26th. Ken, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
For everything you need to know about BioShock Infinite, keep it locked to IGN.